My official designation is Xenobiologist Senior Proctor Zorvath of the Cathar Collective, serving a tenure at the Galactic Concordance Academy on Cygnus X1. My specialty is evolutionary viability assessment, a field I have dedicated my 3 life cycles to mastering. My carapace bears the etched commendations of the High Council for my work on classifying over 200 emergent sapient species. It is a science of data, of meticulous observation and predictable metrics. We measure metabolic efficiency, neural processing speed, environmental resilience within controlled parameters, and genetic stability. It is through this cold, hard lens of science that we build the galactic community, ensuring each new species finds its appropriate niche. When the species designated Homo sapiens first petitioned for inclusion, my preliminary assessment was, to be blunt, utterly unremarkable. They were designated Class 4, Sapient Standard, a classification reserved for species of average intelligence and limited physical specialization. Their home world Earth was a chaotic mess, a Class 7 hazard planet, but one whose dangers were meteorological and geological, not biological in a way that would forge exceptional traits. Or so my data suggested. Their physiology was a study in compromise. Bipedal, endoskeletal, carbon-based life forms with a distressingly narrow band of temperature tolerance. Their sensory organs were primitive. They couldn't perceive gravimetric fluctuations like my people, the Cathar, nor could they see in the ultraviolet spectrum like the avian Virelians. Their strength was negligible compared to a Glypton from a high-gravity world. Their cellular regeneration was slow, their lifespan insultingly brief. They were in every measurable way average. Soft, squishy generalists who had stumbled into intelligence and space travel through sheer, dogged persistence rather than any inherent biological superiority. My report concluded that while they were suitable for Concordance membership, their potential for significant contribution was low. They were adequate, a placeholder species. This view was reinforced by their performance at the Academy. The 2 human exchange students in my advanced xenobiology seminar, Liam O'Connell and Anya Sharma, consistently scored in the median range. In sterile simulations designed to test threat response, Liam would hesitate, his logic pathways cluttered by what their psychoanalysts termed emotional flooding. Anya was more analytical but lacked the raw processing speed of a Cathar or the intuitive leaps of a psionically gifted T-core. They were polite, curious, and thoroughly, disappointingly, average. It was this very mediocrity that made them ideal candidates for the annual senior field expedition. This cycle, the destination was Xylos. Xylos is a Class 9 death world, a planet where life itself is an act of violent defiance against a hostile universe. Its ecosystem is a weaponized nightmare, a product of a binary star system with erratic energy flares, a highly metallic core that generates chaotic electromagnetic storms, and a native biology that has evolved in a constant, lethal arms race. We don't go to Xylos to catalog flora and fauna, we go to test technology and metal. The expedition was sanctioned to field test the Concordance's new Mark IV environmental suits and their integrated biodampener fields. The presence of students was a long-standing tradition, a controlled, high-stakes final exam. Proctor Valerius, a venerable Cathar whose carapace was smooth with age, had summoned me to his observatory overlooking the Academy's shimmering quad. Zorvath, he'd resonated, his tone a low, rumbling hum. Your student selections for the Xylos trip, you've included the humans. Meet the minimum requirements, Proctor, I replied, my vocal plates clicking with precision. Their physiological and psychological profiles indicate a low probability of systemic shock. They are stable, or fragile. Valerius swiveled one of his multifaceted eyes toward me. Their home world is a maelstrom of weather and seismic activity, yet their biology seems remarkably delicate. Is the paradox I noted in my initial assessment, Proctor, I said, a touch of pride in my voice. Earth forged them in chaos, yet produced a species without significant defenses. No natural armor, no potent venom, no specialized sensory adaptations. It's an evolutionary dead end, fascinating in its inefficiency. They will provide an excellent baseline control group to measure the Mark IV's efficacy against the performance of more robust species like the Glyptons or the Virelians. Was silent for a long moment, the only sound the faint thrum of the station's grav plates. There is a saying among the T-Core mystics, the calmest water hides the deepest currents. Be cautious, Zorvath, data points can be deceptive. I dismissed his warning as the philosophical rambling of an old academic. Data was truth. And the data on humans was clear. 2 weeks later, our shuttle, the Stellara 5, descended through the sickly green and orange atmosphere of Xylos. The 20 students were a diverse collection of the galaxy's best and brightest. 2 of my own kind, Cathar cadets named Rylax and Jin. 3 silicon-based glyptons, their crystalline forms shimmering, moving with the slow, deliberate grace of beings from a world with 3 times standard gravity. 4 avian Virelians, their feathers ruffled with nervous energy, their keen eyes darting everywhere. And the 2 humans, Liam and Anya, looking small and soft in their bulky Mark IV suits. Biodampeners at 100%, I announced over the internal comm. My voice was calm, authoritative. I was in my element. External temperature is fluctuating between -20 and 40 degrees Celsius. Atmospheric composition is a nitrogen-methane mix with corrosive trace elements. Keep your helmets sealed at all times. We will disembark at the pre-designated landing zone, establish the perimeter beacon, and begin collecting atmospheric samples. Stay within the beacon's effective range. No exceptions. Liam gave a slightly nervous thumbs-up gesture, a primitive but strangely endearing signal. Anya was already peering at her suit's datapad, her brow furrowed in concentration. She was cross-referencing the atmospheric readings with textbook models. Predictable, diligent. Average, we landed in a clearing of sorts, a patch of reddish, metallic soil surrounded by a forest of crystalline flora that hummed with a low, discordant energy. The air, even filtered through the suit's scrubbers, smelled of ozone and decay. Towering, spire-like plants pulsed with a faint internal light, and the ground was covered in what looked like brittle black grass that crunched under our boots like glass. "This is razorvine," I instructed, pointing to the black ground cover. "Do not make contact. Its edges are monomolecular and can slice through the suit's outer layer with sufficient pressure." The Virelian students fluttered nervously, their wings constrained by their suits. The Glyptons began their slow, ponderous survey, their metabolism already adjusting to the alien environment. My Cathar cadets stood back to back, their hardened carapaces offering a 360-degree field of view. And the humans, they just looked around, their expressions unreadable behind their visors. For 3 hours, the mission proceeded exactly as planned. Data was collected, samples were sealed. The Mark IV suits performed flawlessly, neutralizing the corrosive atmosphere and maintaining a stable internal environment. I was mentally composing the opening lines of my glowing post-mission report. My initial assessment of the humans seemed to be holding true. They followed instructions, performed their assigned tasks with moderate competence, and required no special attention. Then the sky bled. Without warning, the binary suns of Xylos aligned in a rare syzygy, unleashing a burst of electromagnetic radiation so powerful it defied all our predictive models. It wasn't a flare, it was a wave, a silent, invisible tsunami of pure energy. The first indication was a high-pitched scream from the shuttle's reactor, cut short by an explosive crack. Then everything went dead. The lights on our suits flickered and died. The hum of the biodampeners ceased. The comm system hissed into silence. The perimeter beacon vanished. We were plunged into the dim, alien twilight of Xylos, armed with nothing but our own biology, and for the first time in my life I felt the cold, sharp sting of genuine fear. The silence was broken by a panicked shriek from one of the Virelians, a young female named Lyra. "My suit, the heating element is offline, it's sea cold." Her panic was infectious. The other Virelians began to chirp and cry out, their frail, hollow-boned bodies exquisitely sensitive to temperature shifts. My own carapace began to ache as the cold seeped in, the temperature already dropping below freezing. The Glyptons, whose silicon-based biology required immense energy to maintain thermal equilibrium, simply stopped moving. Their internal processes were slowing to a critical state. One of them, a hulking student named Bohr, toppled over with a heavy, crystalline thud. He was entering stasis, a defensive mechanism that would soon become a frozen tomb. My Cathar mind, trained for logic and protocol, raced through contingencies. But every protocol relied on technology. Comms were down. The shuttle was a dead husk, its hull already beginning to frost over. The emergency transponder was fried. We were stranded. We were dying in the midst of the rising chaos. A new sound cut through the alien wind. It was Liam O'Connell's voice, sharp and commanding, stripped of its usual mildness. "Everyone, shut up. Panic is a luxury we don't have." His voice was not loud, but it had a quality of absolute authority that silenced the hysteria. He moved with a speed and purpose I had never seen in him. He knelt beside the fallen Glypton, placing a gloved hand on its torso. "It's like a block of ice," he muttered. He looked at Anya. "We need heat, now." Anya, who I expected to be frozen in analytical paralysis, was already scanning the wreck of the shuttle. The aft fuel cells, they're ruptured. If we can find a spark. Emergency flare kit, Liam shouted, already moving toward a storage locker on the shuttle's exterior that was thankfully operable by a manual latch. He ripped it open, his movements economical and devoid of hesitation. He pulled out a chemical flare. No, wait, Anya cried out. The atmosphere is methane-rich. A direct flame will cause an explosion. We don't use the flame, Liam said, his eyes scanning the landscape. He pointed to a cluster of the crystalline plants. Those things were pulsing with light, some kind of bioluminescence, an energy transfer. What happens if we introduce a catalyst? My mind struggled to catch up. He was improvising a solution faster than my logic centers could process the problem. Before I could formulate a proper scientific objection, Anya was nodding. He's right. It's a long shot, but if the cells in those plants react to the flare's chemical compound, it might trigger a contained, exothermic reaction instead of ignition. Was insane. It was a wild guess based on a half-observed biological phenomenon. It was also our only hope. While Anya and Liam worked, I watched the other students. The Virelians were huddled together, shivering violently, their minds lost to terror. My Cathar cadets, Rylax and Jin, had assumed a defensive posture, their training dictating that they protect the proctor. But they were inert, waiting for orders I was incapable of giving. They were products of a stable society, trained for predictable threats. Chaos was a foreign concept. Liam, meanwhile, had torn a strip of metal from a damaged panel on the shuttle. With a piece of sharpened rock, he began to work it, his hands moving with an instinctive, primal grace. He was fashioning a tool, a crude knife. The sight sent a strange shiver through my carapace. It was the first time I had ever seen a sapient being create a tool from scratch with such raw, immediate necessity. He used the knife to carefully slice open the top of the flare stick, pouring a small pile of the powdered hypergolic compound onto the metal strip. Anya directed him to a spot near the base of one of the light spires. There, the energy conduit seems thickest. Liam carefully nudged the powder into a crevice in the plant's crystalline bark. We all held our breath. He stood back and with a flick of his wrist threw a small stone at the powder. The result was not a fire, but a brilliant, silent flash of emerald light. The plant it touched began to glow with intense heat, its internal luminescence brightening to the intensity of a small sun. The warmth that washed over us was immediate and life-saving. One by one, Liam and Anya repeated the process, creating a circle of glowing, heat-radiating flora around our makeshift camp. The Virelians stopped shivering, their feathers fluffing up in the radiant warmth. The Glyptons, including the one who had collapsed, began to stir as their core temperatures stabilized. I stared at the two humans. They were breathing heavily, their faces pale behind their cracked visors, but they were alive, more than alive. They were in command. This was my first inkling that my data, my life's work, was fundamentally, terrifyingly wrong. Humans weren't generalists because they were inefficient. They were generalists because their evolutionary history was a relentless, non-stop gauntlet of extinction-level events. Ice ages, supervolcanoes, asteroid impacts, plagues. Their planet hadn't just been chaotic. It had been actively, maliciously trying to kill them for 200,000 years. They hadn't evolved specialized traits because specialization was a death sentence in an environment that changed its rules every millennium. They had evolved something far more potent. Adaptability, not the slow, generational adaptability of natural selection, but a rapid, cognitive, behavioral adaptability. The ability to look at a broken world and see not just scrap, but tools. Not just danger, but opportunity. As night fell, a new horror emerged. From the shadows of the crystalline forest, things began to stir. They were Xylos's apex predators. We called them shadow stalkers. Gaunt, six-limbed creatures with exoskeletons the color of obsidian, they moved with a liquid grace that belied their size. Their eyes were sonar pits, emitting clicks that echoed through the clearing, mapping our positions. The first scream came from a Virelian who had strayed too close to the edge of the light. A black limb, tipped with a scythe-like claw, lashed out of the darkness and dragged him away. The orderly group dissolved back into shrieking terror. Rylax, one of my Cathar cadets, charged forward, his battle logic screaming to engage the threat. For the concordance, he resonated, his arm blades extended. A shadow stalker met his charge. It didn't overpower him. It sidestepped his linear attack, its movements fluid and unpredictable. One of its claws hooked into a joint in Rylax's carapace, prying it open with an awful cracking sound. He fell, his logical mind unable to process a foe that refused to fight by any known rules of engagement. And then I saw it. The look in Liam O'Connell's eyes, My Cathar vision can perceive minute muscle contractions and thermal shifts in other beings. As Liam watched the stalker dissect my student, his heart rate didn't spike with fear. It steadied. His body temperature, which had been erratic, stabilized, his pupils dilated but not in terror, in focus. I was not looking at a terrified prey animal. I was looking at a predator sizing up its competition. "Anya," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "Their eyes are sonar-based. They're mapping us with sound." Anya, who was tending to the injured Rylax, looked up. "High frequency. Our suits were probably masking us before. Now we're ringing like bells to them. So we give them a different sound," Liam said. He grabbed several discarded metal panels from the shuttle. He handed them to the remaining students, even me. "Bang these on the ground, irregularly. Confuse their imaging." He then picked up the crude spear he had fashioned earlier from a sharpened piece of the shuttle's landing strut. "Anya, keep the fire plants going. Jin," he said to my remaining terrified Cathar cadet, "you're strong. You stand with me, we make a wall, nothing gets through." The hierarchy had inverted. The Class 4 sapient standard was now giving orders to a Cathar, a member of a species that had commanded starships when humans were still daubing paint on cave walls. And Jin, to my astonishment, obeyed without question. He recognized the same thing I was beginning to. This wasn't about status or intelligence quotients. This was about survival, and the human was the only one in the group who seemed to understand its brutal grammar. For the next 8 hours, we survived a siege. The clang of metal on metal filled the air, a chaotic symphony that clearly disoriented the stalkers. They would dart in, testing our defenses, only to be met by a wall of two determined figures, the human and the Cathar. Liam didn't fight like a soldier. He fought like something ancient and desperate. He didn't meet the stalkers' strength. He used their momentum against them, deflecting their lunges, jabbing at their joints with his improvised spear. He was a persistence hunter, wearing down a stronger foe through sheer intelligence and stamina. At one point, a stalker managed to slip past our noise barrage and lunged for Anya. Liam didn't even turn his head. He threw a rock he'd palmed earlier with pinpoint accuracy, striking the creature on one of its sensitive sonar pits. The stalker shrieked and recoiled, momentarily stunned, giving Jin the opening to land a devastating blow. I watched, my mind reeling, my entire worldview crumbling. I began to run simulations in my head, cross-referencing this new data. Human endurance wasn't a flaw of inefficiency, it was a weapon. Their bodies were designed for marathon running, for chasing prey to the point of exhaustion over days, not minutes. Their ability to sweat was a ridiculously effective cooling system, allowing them to remain active in extreme heat while other species would collapse from thermal stress. Their immune systems, forged by millennia of plagues, were robust and adaptable. Their omnivorous diet meant they could derive energy from almost any organic source, and their minds were the true terror. They possessed a unique, paradoxical blend of structured, analytical thought and chaotic, intuitive creativity. Anya could diagnose an alien plant's chemical properties from a single glance, while Liam could turn a piece of wreckage into a spear. They were scientists and savages in the same breath. They were the ultimate problem solvers because they had evolved on a planet that was the ultimate unsolvable problem. Earth wasn't their cradle. It was their crucible. It was a training ground that had brutally culled any trait that wasn't ruthlessly, efficiently, adaptable. We, the species of the Concordance, had evolved on gentle, stable worlds. We were hothouse flowers, beautiful and specialized. The humans were weeds. They could grow in the cracks of a pavement, thrive in a toxic wasteland, and choke out anything that stood in their way. When the rescue shuttle finally broke through the clouds at dawn, drawn by the massive thermal signature of our camp, they found a strange sight. 19 survivors huddled around a circle of glowing plants. 2 were Cathar, 1 gravely wounded. 3 were Glyptons, slowly regaining function. 3 were Virelians, traumatized but alive. And 2 were human, exhausted, bleeding, but standing guard over the rest with sharpened sticks in their hands. Back at the academy, the debriefing was a formal affair. The official report cited the unprecedented electromagnetic storm and a catastrophic failure of the Mark IV suits. The survival of the students was credited to my exemplary leadership under duress. A lie I did not have the courage to correct, but I wrote another report. A classified addendum sent directly to Proctor Valerius and the High Council. It was the most difficult document I have ever composed. I began by retracting my initial assessment of Homo sapiens. Species classification, Homo sapiens, I wrote. Previous designation, Class 4, Sapient Standard. Revised designation, Class 10, Apex Adaptive/Persistence Predator. There was no Class 10, I created it. It was the only way to describe them. Species displays unparalleled adaptability to chaotic, high-stress environments, my report continued. Their physiological and psychological traits, previously assessed as average or inefficient, are now understood to be components of a highly effective survival strategy forged in a unique evolutionary crucible. Key traits include 1. Extreme endurance. Lactic acid cycling and thermoregulatory perspiration allow for prolonged physical exertion that vastly exceeds that of most known sapient species. They are not fast, but they are relentless too. Cognitive plasticity. The human mind operates on a dual processing model, capable of switching between methodical, long-term planning, as exhibited by student Sharma, and rapid, intuitive, good-enough problem-solving, as exhibited by student O'Connell. This allows them to improvise effective solutions from limited resources in real time. 3. Latent predatory instincts. When faced with a mortal threat, human subjects can exhibit the focused aggression, tactical awareness, and pack coordination behavior characteristic of an apex predator. Their social affability is, I now theorize, a form of camouflage, the cooperative pack dynamic of a hunting species at rest. 4. Tool use as an extension of biology. For humans, technology is not merely a convenience. It is a fundamental survival instinct. The impulse to see a rock and imagine a hammer, or a stick and imagine a spear, is hardwired into their psyche. This allows them to weaponize their environment. My conclusion was the part that made my manipulator claws tremble as I transcribed it. Galactic Concordance made a grave error in its assessment of humanity. We evaluated them in the sterile, controlled conditions of our academies and laboratories, environments where their unique strengths are rendered dormant. We mistook the resting predator for a docile herbivore. We judged the weed by the standards of the orchid. The planet Xylos, a world that nearly destroyed the best technology and the most robust biologies the Concordance has to offer, proved to be an environment startlingly similar in its chaotic demands to the humans' own home world. On Xylos, they were not stranded. They were home. The implications are profound. Humanity is not just another species to be indexed and integrated. They are a force of chaotic potential unleashed upon a galaxy that has known relative stability for eons. We have invited into our orderly house a creature that was born and raised in a hurricane. They are not malicious, I believe, but they are shaped by a history of survival that the rest of us cannot possibly comprehend. We must revise all our protocols. We must study them not through our metrics, but through theirs. We must understand the depths of the drive that was forged on that terrifying, beautiful blue world. We welcome them as peers. We must now recognize them for what they are. The quiet, unassuming, and potentially most dangerous species the galaxy has ever known. The question is no longer what their place in the galaxy will be. The question is, now that they are here, what will the galaxy become? I finished the report and looked out my viewport at the star-dusted expanse. Somewhere out there, Earth continued its chaotic dance. And across the quad, I saw Liam and Anya walking together, laughing about something. They looked so harmless, so soft, so average, and I had never been more terrified in my life. We hadn't discovered a new species. We had discovered a new kind of survival. We had discovered fire, and we had invited it into a library.